This is a Halloween edition of this version of reality. Hopefully you won't be too scared by our tales of John and car sale nightmares.
Sitting here at my computer, I am bored, I am doing absolutely nothing, so it seemed like a good idea at the time to just hit the record button and record yet another episode of this version of reality. Liamo All-Star here. How is everybody doing? If you're as bored as I am, well, my only cure to boredom at this point is talking. Your cure to boredom is listening to me. So, hey, maybe we're both achieving something right now, or perhaps we're just kind of, just sitting here, wishing we had something better to do, but we're stuck with each other for the moment. But I've got a few topics on my mind, and one of them I want to get off my chest right now, which is, as the title of the episode states, Who's John? And car selling nightmares. Car sale nightmares. Whatever I decided to put an exact title. Who's John and car sale nightmares? Well, if I can quickly interject in between and put a previous little snippet which I recorded between myself and Saever, also known as Alan. I've got to admit, at the time when that was done, we were both very tired. Alan more so than myself because, well, we just got done doing a recording session with a lot of various things that we were doing at the time, and that wasn't the end of the night for us because we were going out with a couple of friends as well and went to play some mini golf to some very disastrous results. I believe that Saever nearly took out a couple of people by shooting that damn freaking ball Happy Gilmore style. Almost took me out with the ball, just bounced off a shed and nearly got me in the head. And even though I am the all-star, I performed just as well as I always have in mini golf, which is to say that just like Happy Gilmore in that sense, I cannot putt. And that's essentially what the game is about. Well, I'll just have to work on that. But in the meantime, well, I have to admit, like I said, we're tired. The recording was interrupted a bit. But hey, it's our little explanation because John is a guy that has come up from time to time. In particular, my routine with regards to getting my bike license and then my car license. And so essentially also the topic of discussion in a couple of other podcasts and a couple of references in a couple of the video series, just a little bit of a running joke. Who is John? Well, let me just, with the power of editing, splice this in right now, and you will find out who the hell is John. Alan wants me to record, so I'm recording. I hit play. In this version of reality, once again, although he's just going to sit there mostly and do no talking because he doesn't want to talk so much about it, but people keep asking me, who's John? Who is John? He was our driving instructor, a creepy, old driving instructor. That's who he was. And we got stories to tell about John, or me more than Alan, because he just doesn't want to talk about it. He's still recovering. I mean, you're 28 as of this, so what, 11, 10 years since it's been the last time you saw him?
Almost 12, yeah.
12 years. We needed him to get our license. He was the cheapest guy around. And I guess there's a good reason as to why you should be picky and choosy with your driving schools. And money does get you a better driving instructor. Who's John? Well, allow me to start the story of my introduction, because I've done pretty much a part of my comedy routine on him, explaining the best bits. But, I mean, those bits, if you ever want to hear it, just come to one of my shows where I actually go into that bit. Or maybe I won't. But anyway. My first experience with John. Well, my mother and my father arranged a driving school and said, he seems to be the cheapest and it's Logan driving school, so we're going to go with this guy. And this is the person you're going to get your license through, learn to drive. And typically when I think a driving instructor, I think at least a middle-aged man, maybe somewhere, maybe that's me being biased, but that's my prejudice and my bias. But this guy broke all the bias. Was there standing waiting for me outside of my high school where he was picking me up. Outside of school, yes, an old man picking up a kid outside of school, and I went into a stranger's vehicle assuming that he was the guy. He was actually the guy. And at least 70-year-old man, and clearly a chain smoker, and his opening line, of course, being the polite introduction. My name is John. I'm going to be doing your driving school. Hey. And then the introduction to the vehicle where the windows are down, the fan was on blaring and this is something that he said, and Alan can even attest to this, every single person who went into his driving school, he got this line. On the first lesson, he'd say, "Oh, the aircon just broke. I've been meaning to get it fixed. I'll have to get it fixed shortly." "Oh, but yeah, the windows are down, the fans are on, so hopefully shouldn't be too bad." And it was pretty much a almost near heat wave at the time. I mean, because your sister went through the driving school as well, which was before me, and then you. So 3 years and the same excuse. He did not get the air conditioner fixed.
Never.
Now Alan's just sitting there like, I don't want to talk about this. He'll just be the kind of guy where I'm going to be talking and be like, yeah, that's right. But, oh, good Lord. Maybe I should let you describe this next part, because the best way to describe how he was, there was one time where he got you to drive around the block at least 3 times to check out the same chick.
He also wanted to know where she lived.
Oh, good God. So what, literally pulled up right beside this random chick? How old did she look?
She would have been about 20. Yes, we did go around the block 3 times. He kept saying yes, just left. Because he wanted to... His words were he wanted to see which house she went into. She was dressed provocatively, I would say. Faux fur and all that. And she wasn't that old. But he was. Which was more than a little creepy.
Well, especially considering you're a 16, 17-year-old kid and you're being told to basically be a wingman, or wing driver in this instance, for an old man. Like, hey, good looking, I'm teaching him how to drive. Maybe you and I could drive it later. He never actually said that. But what did he say to her? Like, literally just, oh, hey, you're a good look.
No, he never actually said anything. We went around the block the 3rd or the 4th time and she was gone.
So you literally went around the block and he was like, where do you live? Not even said that. Or maybe she just caught wind of it and did what anyone would do in that situation and run for help.
Maybe.
But
dove over the fence into somebody's yard.
So we've got the beginning of the character building of this man, and you're thinking, well, maybe he's just a nice guy, He likes the women's. Every time when I was in the driving lesson with him, and we drove past a seemingly attractive woman, he'd always say the same thing, like, "Oh, she's pretty good looking, eh?" And one time it's like, yeah, because like, okay. And one time, where I just basically, this was heading towards the end of my tenure with him as a student. It's like, yeah, she's pretty hot, hey? And it's like, just sort of like, It's like, oh, what, you don't reckon? It's like, oh, no, she's all right, I guess. Yeah. It's like, God damn it. And what's even more creepy is the fact that do we even want to talk about the fact that she was nice? He was nice to your sister. No, he does not want to talk about it.
Oh, she didn't really go into detail about it.
She didn't want to talk about it either. And people right now are probably thinking, "Oh, back off. He's just a nice old man." If I could go on a whim here and say that maybe it's safe to say that John never yelled when she did something seemingly wrong. Like, say, for example, if you were at if you're at an intersection and you're over the line because he basically instructed you to go over the line so that you would have the ability to just go straight through a yellow light, and apparently that's not law, because he has this idea that's sort of sidetracking slightly, but the idea that at an intersection, if you've got the yellow light, then the other side has to have the yellow light as well, so they have to stop. Right. And no, like, really sidetracking here, but just this is very important, because stopping at a yellow light and being over the line and then it going reds is not something you can really get fined for, because I guess it just depends on the cop on the day, and you can always reverse back. It's not recommended by any law officials, but it's
illegal to reverse at a set of lights.
Oh, well, there you go. I just learned something.
It's also illegal to run a red light or to stop in the middle of an intersection. So if you're over that line, you're screwed.
Pretty much. It's like, you're over the line now. You've crossed the line. Oh, you don't want to cross it. Yeah. I'm continuing to sidetrack, but to a very valid point, because I did what I was taught to do. If it's a yellow arrow or yellow intersection, okay, well then I have to go because I'm over the line. This caused my mother to go into a fit. Yeah, I was in the car with my mother at the time, and at least two students of the karate club which were running at the time, and I believe her polite words to me were, "What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing? You want to get us killed? You're going through a yellow light. You never go through a yellow light." But John said, John taught you. John doesn't know what the he's talking about. You know what? Yeah, but they have to stop at the... Right, because people don't run yellow lights. Right, so you know what happens if you run a yellow light and they run a yellow light and you cut into them? Not only do you crash, not only do you get run into, not only can you get killed, but guess what? You're at fault. Now, this was the condensed version of a 20-minute rant, I kid you not. And, people are probably thinking right now, exaggerated. Is that an exaggeration, would you say, Alan? You've met her?
Was I there? Or?
You weren't there, but would you say that would be an exaggeration?
I would believe it, yeah.
You would believe it because you've probably been on the receiving end of a short rant at one point.
But she's a lovely woman who's probably listening to this.
Yeah, well, considering one of the last podcasts, you mentioned how if you were paid $100 million, you'd step in the ring for...
I stand by that.
Hopefully to take a swing. Oh, whatever. But yeah, basically, that rule was definitely debunked. And my father, who basically then caught wind of it, was like, "Do you believe what Rob... This is what he taught." It's like, and then his simple response was, "Yeah, that's not right." So he was like, "Yeah, he doesn't know what he's talking about." So his version, he was probably angrier than her, but you've got one person who represses it and one person who exerts it. So yeah, sidetracking aside, there were other times where, I then was like, because originally my thought was, okay, it doesn't matter. I can't run through that yellow light, especially if there are cars coming. It's like, oh, you gotta go. oh, if you don't go, and then it calls at the red light, oh, that was a test, you would have failed. And I'm sure he said the same thing to you. It's like, you're over the line, you would have failed the test. Whereas if I recall the story from your sister, basically, oh, you're over the line. Yeah, if you go over that line in a test, you'll fail. So already we can dictate that kinder to the female gender than the male gender. And if that doesn't make him sexist, then I don't know what is. I mean, apart from the fact that he wasn't going around the block checking out guys. So, but there was a time where he actually, I mean, to that point where going around the block 3 times, he got me to pull up to some random chick's home one time, and the money that I gave to him went to her. That was weird. I mean, just getting me to drive up to some random chick's address. It could have been just maybe, did he have a daughter? I don't know. Maybe it was just a friend with benefits.
Maybe several, I think.
Well, the daughter, whoever it was, had a kid in the arms at the time, so it's like, maybe baby daddy come to pay child support. And like, I got the, I'm good for the rest. Don't worry, I got a few more lessons to teach, sort of thing. But there were just a few things that he taught that just were completely confusing, convoluting, and stupid. Like, when we were going through a green light intersection, he had an infamous quote, which was simply, "You can stop." And what did he mean by this was exactly that if you're going through a green light intersection, it still doesn't make sense. I don't know. It's like, you can stop if you have to, or something. What? Help me, please. I'm confused. Do you even understand it? I don't understand it.
If the light happened to go yellow, you had the time to stop at that point.
Yeah, but see, now, remember that the air conditioner's not working, so the fan is blaring, the windows are down, the car isn't in the best of condition. I mean, this car was basically on the way out. It had barely a clutch, and the gearbox was on the way out, and from time to time the revs did get stuck, and it was just a loud, noisy old Hyundai Getz that he never bothered to fix. So the wind and everything gushing past my ears, and a subtle old man saying, "You stop." Exactly like that. So it's like, I hear stop, okay, I'm slowing down. "What are you doing?" "You said stop." "I said you can stop." "But I'm stopping." "No, what I said was, if you're going through a green light, you can stop." Huh? I'm just thinking to myself, I need him for my license. I need him for my license. I need him for my license. One little thing I never actually told you or anyone else, so maybe I did. I think it was my 18th birthday. No, was my 18th or 17th? No, it would have been my... I think it was my... I think it was my 18th? Yeah, I think it was my 18th birthday. Because I did some of the driving stuff, because I started late. I was a late bloomer. I started about 17 learning lessons, because I was like, I'll just, start. My parents were like, you know what, you got to get your license. Like, and I made this, it was a funny quip, and, I knew I had to get it sometime, but I made the little joke that's like, I don't see why I need to get my license. And it's like, oh, really? It's like, well, actually, I didn't mean it like that, but I understand what you mean. And yeah, I mean, I'm going to get my license, but right now, I mean, you guys are driving me. So it's like, yeah, just put your foot. It's like, you're getting your license. Like, but I do want to get my license. I mean, it's just like, what's the hurry? Just put my foot into it a little more and a little more. So, yeah, basically, car sucks. Direction sucks. Now, he doesn't have an aircon, right? Right. Alan's against, like, right. Good participation. Yeah. So it was a rainy autumn day, and the stupid method of old people using a heater to get fog off windows. It's a good method to get fog off the front window, but not the side windows, not the passenger back windows, and definitely not the back windscreen. I could not see out of that damn thing. And what do you think happened when I nearly plowed into a car that I couldn't see? Who do you think got blamed?
You.
I got blamed. I mean, how many times did you almost get in an accident because of that stupid car?
I could not count.
You could not count.
Not after 12 years, anyway.
No. But there would have been a time or two would have been like, right, yeah, this car is just stuffing out, trying to get it into reverse, could not get it into reverse, my fault, not the car's fault. Can't get it into fourth gear or fifth gear, not the car's fault, my fault, It's just, everyone had the same issue with that car, just a piece of crap, falling apart, and it was, not because it was poorly maintained or anything. It was because I was a learner driver and I just couldn't, I didn't know how to operate a vehicle. It was actually a few years like PTSD, like post-traumatic, driving syndrome. Or whatever,
TS.
PTDS, like, yes, that. Because every manual I drove after, I couldn't drive a manual after. Like, I had a bad run with a couple of other manual cars that I had after. Spoiler alert, I did get my license. But I couldn't, crappy cars. It's like, I didn't have perhaps the confidence I should have had driving a manual because of the bad experience I had driving a bad manual. You couldn't just shift it into gears. It was like you were taking a gamble every time you shifted the clutch in and tried to pull it into gear. It just went back into, if you wanted to get it to fourth from third, it would go straight into second. If you wanted to get it from fourth into fifth, it would go straight into third. It would not go into gear. And at least 3 years, 3 generations, and it was just exactly the same. Eventually, cut it down, cut it short because this asshole prick doesn't deserve much more time, unfortunately. But getting to the test, D-Day, and I'd done enough time, I'd done enough lessons. I'm thinking, great, fantastic, time for me to get my license. Did he do this with you? Where he told you that he went to book the test, but the computers were down at main roads?
It did take months to get a test booked, yeah.
Because he did try to put that thing over where it's like, forgot to book it or couldn't book it. He did a couple of times where it's like, I've been meaning to book it. Yeah, I'll book it next time. I'll book the test. I'll see when they've got dates available. He had this thing where he basically said, the computer's at main road. Yeah, I've got to do the voice. Yeah, computers are down at main road, so unfortunately I couldn't book a test in. Yeah, so guess I'll just have to keep doing driving lessons until I book it. Told my parents this in particular. My mother's like, really? This is my sound logic in my teen years. Like, because coming through her voice, it made a lot of sense to me now. Really? So you mean to say that all the computers at transport were down? All of them? Teenage brain now kicking in into adult mode. Like, logic and reasoning that isn't fully developed now developing all at the moment. It's like, wait, huh? That makes sense. Like, so you mean to say all the computer, because then if the computers were down at main roads, they wouldn't be able to do anything at all. And I guess you could attest to that slightly because you do work in IT. And if a computer system goes down, is there any way to access it from another computer, from a remote desktop, from some other method like Telegram or, is there?
It depends what the issue is, but more than likely TMR having a complete computer outage would be front page of the newspaper sort of news.
So, yeah, basically the conversation with my mother and John apparently went like this. And she basically said, it was like, okay. Said the same thing she said to me. And Alan's walking away because this is part he doesn't need to be here for. It's like, all right, so you mean to tell me, John, that all the computers at main roads were down? Yeah, that's right. Oh, that's funny because I just called them up before. Seems to me that their computers are back up and running and they've got plenty of spaces to book a test. So, look, here's how it's going to go. My son, if he's not ready to book a test, then that's fine. No, I'll take him through the lessons and we'll go and take all the driving lessons that we need to do and brush him up on his skills. But he's not going to be doing any more lessons with you until the test dates. That's basically it. No one wants to talk about John because there's a creepy old man who was our driving instructor. Each of us passed the driving test, and we're glad that we never had to put up with him again because he was a sexist pig. So sexist that he hated men but loved women so much that he'd drive around the block to check them out and I think he was even paying off one with my driving lesson money. I kid you not. I'm probably going to stop it there because that pretty much describes it. So hopefully that answers your question. It probably really doesn't answer why we spent all that time talking about him, but, you know, I guess you just had to live it. You had to experience it. You had to see it and feel it and be in that moment to believe it. Oh, but that's that little part of it. But that's one half. John gets one half. Car sale nightmares. Why the sales nightmares of cars? Well, because there's a couple of stories that I figure while you're sitting there bored, you might want to listen, because you might learn something about selling cars as well. If you ever have to sell your car, let me think. I've sold a couple of cars in my time, a couple of vehicles, if you will. The first ever car that I ever owned was a Toyota Camry. When I bought the car, it was from a car yard, and it had supposedly a roadworthy. And when we got it inspected after I bought the car, which was $2,000, you know, it was like a 1992 or something, like an old model Camry. It wasn't the car that I feel like Batman. It's not the car that he wanted, but it's the car that he needed. I did not really have my heart set on this car at all, but I was convinced by family members and otherwise that this is the car that you should have right now. It had a tow bar, it was a sedan, it had 4 seats, blah blah blah, safety this and rating that, and you're not going to get the car that you want. The first car that you ever have is not going to be the car that you want. My savings went to that car, went to a private inspector just to check things over, and there were a couple of roadworthy issues, like, because it came with a roadworthy and the wheelbarrow, that is where the spare tire goes in, was actually rusting out, and there were a couple of other issues, and yet it had a roadworthy certificate. So in other words, either the roadworthy had been forged or just basically, fudged up. Just someone who was perhaps a mate just wrote up a bunch of roadworthies for them. But then again, at that time, it was back in 2005, around about that time. So I think that the laws regarding, roadworthies, and the fact that they're also now can be done digitally, they got to be lodged with main roads. It was a bit of a different time, but still, my mother went with me and took the car back, advocated for me. My legal counsel is my mother. You don't want to mess with her. But yeah, so she took the car back to them and said, right, a couple of roadworthy issues. You need to fix them, otherwise you could legally report them. And that's a lesson to everyone, if the car is bought from a used car lot and it's as a supposed roadworthy on it, and it comes back with any issues, well then obviously that roadworthy has been fudged up, and you have the right to take it back and get it rectified. Otherwise, effectively you'll be driving around with a lemon, and you can't make lemonade out of a lemon car, let's just say that much. But yeah, it was fixed. They had to weld in a new wheel, like a wheel well or whatever they call it, in the boot, and a couple other minor things. But it was a purpose car. It did what it had to do. Had some issues with it along the way. It was a car that survived getting semi-flooded because during a big spout of rain, I was doing a test at the time down at, I think it was around Stones Corner in Brisbane, and the car park allegedly was prone to flooding, so saith the sign. It said this car park is prone to flooding, and it came big rain spell, and as I was doing a test, like an instructor or a teacher or someone came in to where we were all doing the test and said, just to let you know, if anyone's parked in the car park and they're worried about their car, you might want to move it now because it's flooding. So if you think your car, is parked there. You might want to move it now before. And I was doing the test, and then, because they allowed us to be excused from the test if we had to move our car, if they, that sort of thing. And yeah, so I thought to myself, I should probably go check it. And also, I used that as an excuse in the test because I wasn't doing too well. There was a bit of subject matter that perhaps I needed a bit more study on, so I used that as an excuse. And well, good thing I got there in time, because there was water starting to fill up in the floor of the vehicle. But yes, so not in the history of the car or anything, but eventually I ended up getting another car, which was a Honda Prelude 1993 model, and the deal with getting that car obviously meant selling my Toyota Camry. Now, that Camry was now worth absolutely nothing, and trying to get it sold, that's trying to sell it for, I don't even remember. I think we were only trying to sell it for maybe $800 or something ridiculous price. And it wasn't going to be sold with a reg or a roadworthy. Not that it really needed it, but at the same time, when you got people coming in, it's a cheap car, it's a decent car, maybe just needs a bit of this, a bit of that, bit of TLC. And you got people that come in and still umming and ahhing, trying to bust down the price. Had one guy come along, wanted to look at the car, and I was like, oh well, I was just overly nice at that time. I should have just told this guy to piss off. Come along, and he rocks up in this Bommodore, a Commodore for anyone who doesn't know what the reference is there. And then he's like, oh, well, I'm just buying this car for whatever purpose. I don't care. I didn't pay attention. It's like, it was a little low on oil, but there was still oil in it. It's like, oh, well, I'm not driving it till you go get an oil. Go get some oil. Didn't have really much money at the time, so I only could afford like a little tiny bottle, which was probably overpriced from petrol station. Went and got it, filled it up with oil, had hardly any fuel, and it's like, oh, it's got hardly any fuel. It's like, this guy was just bitching from the start. It's like, alright, well, look, just take it for a test drive. Took it for a test drive, it drove fine, came back, it's like, oh, well, I'll take it, but, would you take $500 for it? It's like, whatever, just looking to get rid of it. And then he did something weird, because one of the tires was starting to go a bit bald, like it was running out of tread, and he was, then he was like, oh, we've got to change the tire before I do anything. So then he starts, we get the jack and the tools to take the tire off, and then he grabs the nuts, and the nuts were hot, and he's like, oh, those are boiling hot. Oh, there's no way that we barely even drove it. Those brakes are really heating up. I mean, you feel the wheel, it's really hot. It's like, well, it's like, one, it's being out in the sun, and two, that's typically what happens when you use brakes. They heat up when the brakes compress. This guy had no idea what he was talking about, obviously, but he used as an excuse to, oh no, sorry, no, I'm not, I'm just not going to buy it, no. So he reneged on his own, the whole, I'm going to buy it, I'm going to take it, just because the wheel was hot, like the nuts were hot. It's not like, oh, well, you couldn't just spend like maybe $100 or something to just replace the brakes. I mean, what an idiot. And you think that's the worst of it. It really isn't. With this car in particular, the Toyota Camry, well, the person who did come to eventually buy it came all the way up from, I believe it was Bundaberg, and we nicknamed him Cowboy Bob. I don't think I really caught his name, or maybe it was Bob. And he was a big boy. But he took the train all the way down from, and anyone who's done a little bit of geography and look at where Bundaberg is compared to where Brisbane is, and you do the math. So taking the train, and also because of our magnificent trains, which are basically Australian trains are only really one step above the old choo-choo trains. And I think even the choo-choo trains were a little faster, to be honest with you. And they ran a lot better. Less delays, perhaps. But nevertheless, wouldn't have been so bad, because he wanted it. He was coming to get it, you know. And something happened. And this is probably one of the only times in history that I could say it was my mother's fault, 100%. And the fact that she'll hear that right now, she'll probably do her own thing and say, oh yeah, she could have her own podcast series where everything else. It's like, oh, well, if this is my fault, well then why don't I just do something where all these things are all your fault? How about this? How about that? And blah, blah, blah. But I'm still going to go ahead with it anyway. Damn the consequences. So, just to set up, it was, because I constantly was running it on empty because I had no money at the time, so filling up fuel was not my highest priority, and also because it never drove it. The concern being that if you keep running it on empty, the gunk in the bottom of the tank will run through, you'll stuff up the fuel lines, yada yada yada. So what happened then was that, filled it up with a bit of fuel, and I did all the oil and, sparks and everything else, just general maintenance. And then my mum did the same, and she filled it up with oil. And it was like, she didn't check the oil, the dipstick. And when I saw her doing that, it's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm filling it up with oil. It's like, I already did that. Now it's overfilled. It's like it's going to have twice the... Because she was just barreling it in. Like, oh, well, I didn't know. So then I had to get the sump plug, and, it had to... the oil basically had to be changed again. You had to be emptied out. So then from there, the car was started, and it started spluttering. It started running really rough. And then because remember what I just said, the aforementioned, it was constantly being run on empty, that the accusation was that, you idiot, and this is the very clean filtered version, you have screwed up the car running it empty all the time. Obviously it's finally happened. Gunk has run through the fuel line and stuffed it up. So went down to Super Cheap, the local auto place, got some fuel line cleaner and just dumped it in. So, look at that. That's my alarm to say that I got a gig tonight. Little interruption there. Where am I performing? Well, just check out my Facebook. Little plug and interruption in between, but hey, you know what? This is my podcast, I'll do whatever the hell I want. But nevertheless, so what happened then was we were going through, and this car was spluttering, and it was like... it was running maybe only on a couple of cylinders for some reason. Like, there was something wrong with the car. So, well, our mechanic neighbour, when we were on better terms with him, another story there, but nevertheless, was not home, so we couldn't ask them, and no one else we could contact. So I ended up calling up Cowboy Bob and saying, look, there's an issue with the car right now. And he's like, oh, well, I'm at the train station right now, so, I've come all this way to come look at it, so, I may as well come along, and, because I've got no other way to get back, because he was planning on driving the car back. So he took a one-way trip down from the train, and then he was going to drive the car all the way back up from Brisbane, back up to Gympie, to Bundaberg, wherever he was headed. So then, I called up my mate Josh. And Josh, if you're listening right now, I'll have to get you in someday, and just because Josh reckoned that this Cowboy Bob, because we went around, we were looking because we were trying to find an issue, because we had to find out what the issue is that was causing this, because couldn't have been the oil, couldn't have been this, couldn't have been that. Maybe it was the leads. It had to be the leads. Because it was running rough. And, my mate Josh was able to help out a little bit with the mechanical side. Not a mechanic himself, but, he'd done some work on cars. He reckoned it was the leads, maybe it was the spark plugs. That's what it had to be. We're all just putting our heads together, trying to come up with a way to fix this car to get it running again. So after a night of driving around in Josh's then Festiva, and like I said, Josh reckoned that Cowboy Bob and his immense side, because like I said, he was a big boy. He was very tall and very girthy. A nice guy, and the fact that he was even willing to put up with all that, because he figured, no, there's no major issue. It starts, it runs, it does what it's supposed to do. It's just a minor issue that we got to put our heads together and figure out. So we tried trying to find a place which had leads. We got some leads eventually the next morning, because then Cowboy Bob ended up staying the night. We had him sleeping over in our spare beds. We ended up having Chinese for dinner. That was probably the highlight of it all. And the hypothesis being at the time that there had to be an issue, that's because it was overfilled with oil at the time. That couldn't have done it any favors. And there was that suggestion there that it's probably caused the engine to rock a bit. Something's happened, got to try and find it. Mechanic next door ends up coming over and would say there's an issue. He basically touches the car, just touches it, and now it's running perfect. So now we changed the spark plugs, we changed the oil, we've basically done all that to the vehicle to get it, try and get it going. It's coughing, it's spluttering. A plug, an electrical plug for the air filter or whatever it was a little bit loose. All he did was just pushed down on it. It's like, oh, that's all it was. It was just a little bit loose. Oh my god. That's all it was. And it had either been bumped, or when it was filled with too much oil at the time, the engine probably rocked a bit and it kind of maybe jimmied it loose. Whatever it wasn't me. And eventually we looked at Cowboy Bob and said, right, well, do you want to take it for a test drive? And finally took it for a drive, ran beautifully. Now it's got new leads. Now it's got new plugs and all this. So said, right, so because of your trouble and everything, we were down to like 500 to just get rid of it. It's like, okay, because we took your time, I guess we'll offer it to you for 400, for your trouble. And he said to us, you know what, I'm not going to give you any less than 500 for it. It's got new leads, it's got new oil in it, and all that. It runs beautifully. I won't give you any less than 500. Or maybe it was 600. Something like that. I said, alright. And we took the money, and Cowboy Bob, with the Aussie hat, white shirt, jeans, his big girthy self and his big tall girthy self, drove all the way back to Bundaberg. Now I know what some of you are thinking. My goodness. Case closed, tale of the tape, story over. Maybe more of you acute observers are just realizing, wait a minute, you were selling that car without a roadworthy, right? Yeah. You were selling that car without registration, right? Yeah. So you mean to say he's driving that car back from Brisbane to Bundaberg, hundreds of kilometres away, possibly more than, up to maybe 1,000 kilometres or so, and through tolls and everything, unregistered? Yeah. Okay. Whatever. But the car was be a pain in the ass for me at the time. It was in the way. I just wanted it gone. My first ever car, the car that I didn't the car that I didn't want, but it was the car that I needed, gone. That was my first ever car that I ever had, first ever car that I ever sold. Next car that I ever sold, now that's an easy one, because that was my Beamer. My mother bought that off me, my BMW 1997, and that was easy. Now that's an interesting story, because that one just recently got sold. But it was a situation where we had a young dude come along, wanted to have a look at the car, and he came along with a mate, which, okay, yep, sure, you do that. And I sold it to my mother, and that was back in 2013 to 2014. But now we're in 2017 as of this story, and as of the recording of this podcast. So then she was selling it, but I was selling it on her behalf. So continuing on, so this guy wants to buy it. It falls through. He says he's coming at this date, never happens. I've got it on offer on Gumtree and car sales, a couple of websites. Gumtree, I just get these ridiculous offers, like, because we're selling it for 40, originally selling it for 4,500, then dropped it to 4, because figured, well, okay, sell for 4. And this one guy was negotiating, saying, right, well, I'll buy it for 3,500. It's like, well, if we're going to sell for 3,500, then we're not including rego or roadworthy. He's like, oh no, that's fine. Yep. Arranged a date, and it was all set. He was supposed to come. He was supposed to look at it. Problem with that was that I wasn't going to be home at the time, because this is where shortly after I ended up going to America for the US trip, which is also on my YouTube channel, chronicled in previous podcasts. If you've listened to that, if you've watched the series, he never showed. I gave him my mother's number, never showed up. And there were other people that were sending offers that were way under. One guy who wanted to offer me $2,000 and a bike. So I was like, okay, well, what's the bike like? So sent in some information, very vague on it. It's like, okay, need some more specifications. And then he basically ended up coming to me and saying, oh, no, never mind. I thought it was the next model up. So he wanted a car that was essentially a 2000 model Beamer, 323i. Probably should have mentioned that. That's the model of the car. He wanted a 2000 model, which at this point in time fetches more than $4,000 at this point in time. He wanted to get a 2000 model Beamer 323i for $2,000 and a bike, and we didn't even know what the condition of that bike was. But we were selling a 1997 one, and because it was a 1997, he reneged. I was like, right. Had person who sent through a ludicrous and ridiculous offer saying that he would give me $2,000 for it. This is before even coming to look at it, and I simply responded, sure, $2,000. Yep, I'll take $2,000 as a down payment, with $2,000 outstanding owed at point of sale. My goodness, he didn't get back to me. I had some other idiot do exactly the same, said the same thing. Another person who offered $1,800, who wanted to pay $1,800 before even coming to look at it, before even arranging a test drive. So I did the same thing. It's like, yeah, sure, $1,800, I'll accept as a deposit with $2,200 owing upon point of sale. Eventually, finally, we got a seemingly serious buyer who came, didn't offer to have any negotiation before even test driving it, come along and brought a mate along. He didn't even test drive it, he got his mate to, and as they were test driving it, they only wanted to drive it up and down the street once. That was weird, but I urged them. It's like, look, you got to take it for a test drive. Yeah, go further, go around the block, do what you need to do. And as we're in the car, he's obviously had no experience negotiating car sales in any way, shape or form. We're still test driving, and he's saying, oh yeah, I'll take it, so how much do you want for it? We haven't even finished the test drive yet. He hasn't even looked through the car. It's like, well, because I'm selling it on another person's behalf. It's like, oh, what if I were to take it today? How much would you take in cash? Like, well, I'd have to call up the owner, because like I said, selling it on another person's behalf. Oh, no, don't worry. Well, I'll pay the 4. The $4,000 being because he wanted it with Rego and roadworthy. If we were to sell it without, we would have been selling it for $3,500. So puts down a $2,000 deposit, and we were to arrange the roadworthy and safety certificate. And keep the Rego on it, which was probably about 5 months left to run it. So we had to get a couple of issues rectified. Not major issues, but issues nonetheless that just, because roadworthy means that there's absolutely nothing wrong with the vehicle upon inspection, that, everything runs, but unfortunately with roadworthies, even the smallest thing like an empty washer reservoir for your windscreen wipers is a roadworthy. And if you get a smart-ass mechanic who wants to fail you on that and says, well, you can't bring it back until that's fixed, there'll be decent people who say, oh, it was empty, but I just filled it up for you. But, there are cops that can even, on main roads, transport department that can and have in the past booked people because they have an empty water reservoir for their wiper washers, for their windscreen washers. It's ridiculous. But then they've got that argument, say, oh, well, if your car gets dirty, your windscreen, and you don't... But I digress once again. So there comes along that's there. And by the way, as well, this guy was buying it allegedly for a mate. And so it's like, okay, well, that's your story. I really don't care. I didn't say that to him, but still, obviously not concerned with that. So the person who contacted me and paid me a down deposit was not the person who was buying the vehicle. The person who test drove it that day was not the person buying the vehicle. When they came to collect on the day after we got everything arranged for them, there were 2 different people again, with the original person who had been in contact with me, who paid the down payment, who paid the deposit, come along, and kind of yobbos, they look like the kind of people that you might see doing burnouts in that car later. And I just thought to myself, well, by golly gosh, this car's going to die. They're going to kill it. But, we wanted it gone. It's not our concern as to how they treat the vehicle. But they wanted to take it for a test drive again. This new guy come along, this guy who test drove the vehicle second time, so this is now the second test drive that they've gone on, was not the guy who was purchasing the vehicle or the person that it was going to be registered in. But the guy who was to be the registered owner was in the passenger seat. He did not test drive the car, but it was to be his car. But the guy that I was talking to, the guy that put the down deposit, he paid for it for him, I guess? I don't know. It's a weird situation. And so went for another test drive. They were driving conservatively, but the style of driving that they did, the guy was a late merger, a late breaker, a bit of heavy on the accelerator and tight on the turns. But you could tell that if I wasn't in the car, and that's the thing, they were just going to take it for a test drive without giving me a license or without me being in the car. If I wasn't there and they went for a test drive, they would have driven it and they would have probably run it as hard as they wanted to test drive it. So then they realised that they forgot to bring the paperwork. So they went and got the paperwork, came back, and wanted to start the car again. It's like, alright, so look over the vehicle. It starts making a bit of noise. And it's like, oh, what was that? It's like, just a little bit of sounds like a little bit of vibration. They reckon, oh, it sounds like an engine knock. So looking under the hood, probably the first time they ever looked under the hood of the vehicle, and they found it's like, oh, it's just the radiator fan. It's like, yeah, it's probably, I don't know, but like I said to them before, I was very open and transparent with these people. I'd said, right, so there was the issue that was rectified for the roadworthy, which was the rear steering bushes, the arm bushes, the what else? The window washer motor needed to be replaced. There's like a couple of bulbs, but I was very transparent because I said, replace the fluids, replaced, filter, spark plugs, been maintained, last time service, yada yada, oil, this, that, tires, replace them, bulbs, the driver side rear indicator, solder, sometimes came a bit loose and might need to replace that. People who have Beamers would probably know what I'm talking about there. If not, look it up. I don't want to have time to explain. But yeah, so essentially I was transparent with all these things, and I also mentioned how the radiator was recently replaced and that it was still under warranty if there are any issues. And lo and behold, a little tiny bit of noise that came, and then it went, and then it never came back. I said, yeah, it sounds like, oh yeah. So they concluded that, it must have been a loose belt, and when they put the radiator back in and all that, they mustn't have tightened it fully. It's like, well, that's why, look, like I said, it's under warranty. No worries. Oh, no, don't worry about it. No, it's too easy if it's under warranty. No, sweet as. So then they accept this as a condition of the vehicle potentially, and they sign the paperwork and give me the rest of the money, and then they prepare to go. And then before they go, they ask us what's the name of the radiator place and the information that we need to give to them. So we do that. And give them the name of the place, give them the number, the address, and say this is, the name and the registration, just because they'll have it on file, because, we could try and locate a receipt, but, they'll have it on their file, and they'll be able to, see, if it's under warranty, if it's an issue, just take a look at it, whatever you need to do. So then they drive off. Now, this was at about 11:30 in the morning. 8:30 at night, I get this text that stated, oh, the car's broken down, mate. Your roadworthy guy's done a dodgy. It's like, what? It just didn't even say. It's just just a question mark. And he sent me a couple of photos, and wouldn't you believe it? Apparently, the bracket for the radiator fan had broken and had then fallen forwards, and the radiator fan has then apparently chipped away at a coolant hose or something. I really don't know. It hasn't been explained, but I just basically said, take it to the radiator place and see if it's under warranty. To which then he says to me, well, you know what, I can either get it towed to you and you can give me my money back, or I can tow it to this place and then they fix it and then you pay me for it. So then that's where I was like, you know what, my part in this was simply to sell the car on another person's behalf. I have done that. So now what am I going to do? I'm giving it to the former registered owner to deal with. Long story short, basically went through and it's like, right, so you bought your used car. Now here's the thing, used cars cannot be sold with a warranty, and the fact is that because it's a used car, to get a proper warranty on all parts and everything, you'd have to take the car apart bit by bit and inspect it all individually. Now with new cars, that's very easy because all these parts are brand new, they have been inspected, they are given a warranty individually with the parts, and they are expected to last a certain period of time. With used cars, obviously there is a condition where it's like if the car breaks down and say like the engine blows or the transmission seizes up, a wheel falls off, that sort of thing, you could say okay, but a leaky hose and just a bracket. So to get the long short of it, effectively that what was said was that they drove it and they kept driving it, and they didn't go and get it inspected, and something happened. Now, a radiator fan bracket doesn't just break, so that's interesting in and of itself. But then the fact that they wanted us to either give them the money back or pay for the repairs, it's like, well, hang on. We don't know what you've done to the vehicle. They could have thrashed it, they could have... And the fact that it just suddenly broke down 9 hours later. And now they're saying, oh, we barely even drove it. It's like, right. So we don't know what they've done to it. We know that they probably throttled it. They probably did something to it. I don't know. I don't care. And neither did my mother, who basically said to them, you were supposed to take it there to get it checked over. It's like, oh, your roadworthy guy's done a dodgy. It's like, no, he hasn't. No, he didn't. And if he did, then you need to take it up with that guy. Oh, well, this part... And it's like, well, it's under warranty. And it was on the understanding that you were going to take it straight there afterwards. And the fact is that you bought it and accepted the condition of the vehicle. So, you know, it's your car now. Oh, well, yeah, I'll take it there, but if we have to see if it's covered under the warranty, otherwise you're going to have to give us the money back. It's like, you're not getting your money back. Because here's the thing. They inspected the vehicle. They looked it over. There were no issues. The inspector did. The former mechanic before any of this. His mates. The person who was getting the car registered in the name of. Myself and my mother. So, well, look, we're talking about 8 to 9 people who have inspected this vehicle and there are no issues. But this person who is kind of young and kind of naive, you know, obviously doesn't want to take responsibility for his actions, so has just basically gone, well, someone else has to pay for this. It's like, no. You have to be an adult about this. Sometimes things happen for absolutely no reason. It was probably the worst of luck, but if 2 mechanics, if another 6 people, his other 4 mates and himself and us, all of us couldn't pick that issue. There is no one to blame here. It is just a case of happenstance. But, you know, he tried to come off brazen and say, oh, well, you know, I'm gonna... It's like, well, what? It's your car, just go get it fixed. You know? It's like saying, for example... You know, if it ran out of fuel down the highway and then you walk all the way back to our house, knock on the door and say, you know, well, it's out of fuel. You better fill up this jerry can or I'm getting my money back. You know, if it gets a flat tire, you know, a hose like that, you know, and what was hypothesized as well is that brackets don't just break. So either they've throttled or thrashed the car, done something to it, or, you know, it could just be general wear and tear. That's just the worst of luck, like I said, or they've gone and it actually was... all this time it could have just been a bracket that was wearing out or that had been cracked or, you know, weakened at some point through wear and tear or removal, replacement, whatever, not sure. So then what could have happened is that they thought that it was a loose belt and that it wasn't. So then they've probably gone and tightened that belt. Now there's too much tension. It's pulled the fan forward, it's broken it off its bracket, and it's caused that issue. But the unfortunate thing about all that is, and there's something as well to look out for, is that, you know, if you're at all concerned that a vehicle is not in the condition that you think it should be, don't go ahead with the sale. Don't commit to it. You know, I've bought fixer-uppers that have had issues that I thought were not very bad, that I could have made money on, and I'll get to that in a second because that details the next car that I sold. But before I get into that, I guess a little piece of advice for people. Buyer beware, be careful. Because especially when you buy a used car, there is no guarantee, there is no warranty, there can't be. Because, you know, even the law, you know, it dictates, and for good reason says that, you know, because there's no warranty, there's no guarantee, it's effectively what's called a concrete warranty. Once it gets off the concrete of a driveway, that's it. You know, or a tail light warranty. Once, you know, you can no longer see the tail lights of a vehicle, that's a warranty expired. You know, the only way you can get around that is basically if there was a major catastrophic issue like the engine blowing. But even still, if you're buying a used vehicle and you're buying it as is, then you've got to, if you're worried at all, you're concerned that there might be an issue. There may be absolutely no issue whatsoever today, and then tomorrow something happens, and you don't even think twice about it. We all do it. That little tiny noise. And you think, it's nothing. And it is nothing. And it could go driving with that little annoying noise for years. Or that little annoying noise could be the indicator that, hey, something's wrong. Get it fixed now. And you go, nah, I'm not going to bother. And then it breaks. But you are the one driving it. You see what the problem is there? Is that it's not just about what you did or what you could have done. It's also about what you didn't do. And that's also a matter of responsibility for if you buy a used car. It's not just what you do, it's what you don't do. And it's also what states in the law. It'll say in a lot of laws in a lot of different places that state that it is your responsibility to get a private inspector to look at the vehicle. Like, for example, if you would have said, look, it's a concern, it wasn't a concern until something went wrong. But if it was a concern for him, then he shouldn't have filled out the paperwork, and he shouldn't have paid for the vehicle and then driven it off and done whatever he did with it. He should have said, right, until we get it checked over by these radiator guys, then I'll just keep the down payment. I won't fill anything out yet. Let's go get it looked at just to make sure. And especially if it's under warranty, then it's hold harmless for all of us. No one's at fault here. It's just, it is what it is, But if you take it and accept it in the condition that it is, then, in circumstances like this, where you're just a bit naive and you let things go and you do something or you don't do something, you could cause an issue yourself. Or an issue can go undiagnosed and it should have been fixed or something. Who knows? But if you're the one that drove it, knowing that there's an issue or even thinking that there might be one, then guess who's at fault? Unfortunately, not the person before you. Because cars are funny things. Like I said before, and even mechanics will say, there are times where cars make noises, squeaks, squawks, and everything will run for years, hundreds of thousands of kilometers. And a little tiny noise could run, you could hear it, and your car runs, and then it just stops running. And then all you've got to say is that, I heard a noise, but I didn't think anything of it. Well, it's like, well, why didn't you get it fixed? Oh, well, I didn't think it was anything, and it happened to be, and now you're out. Instead of, maybe it just being a minor issue that would have cost maybe $100, it could be up for thousands, or it could be the end of the vehicle. Now, I know for a fact that this vehicle that was sold it's just a minor issue. It's not even an issue, but it was an overreaction, obviously. But hey, you know what? Just that little disaster. Why can't we have any nice things? Why can't we just sell a car? Now this is where I get into the final story of a car sale, because the car that I sold before my mother's BMW the second time, but after I sold the BMW the first time, my little Project Honda Prelude, which was a car that I bought for $1,000. Now, originally it was for sale for $1,500, but the guy who was selling it got sick and tired of no one wanting to buy it, even though it was only listed for sale for a couple of days. So he decided he was going to part it out instead. And I figured, okay, what's wrong with the vehicle? Oh, nothing, I'm just sick and tired. So I said, well, I still want it if it's there. So then there's a guy already removing, and this car, it was like about 190,000 kilometers, and there was nothing wrong with it. Well, except maybe a few there was a few issues that may or may not have been there, but it didn't seem like there were any major issues with the engine and that. Just some perhaps electrical issues and a couple of other things, but it looked like a steal. And if you put the time and effort into it, you could invest and make money out of it. It was a really good deal. So, and especially the side skirts, I was looking to put that onto my little darling pet car of mine, my Honda Prelude, which everyone knows about. It's only got 90,000 Ks, or 99,000 at the moment. But I'm talking about the one I'm selling, that I bought to sell. So this car had now been going to be parted out, and this guy automatically regretted it, because the guy who came to get a couple of parts, there were side skirts, he ripped them off. He took those, he wanted those, and the radiator. And in doing so, and this guy was obviously, he was in a nice suburb, and he bought a nice house, and he looked like one of those guys that, probably from a lower socio-economic area, but has made it and is now trudging through the middle class and heading to upper class, and living in more of a middle to upper class suburb. So you could just imagine that what would happen if some yobbo comes and rips the radiator out of a car, and it's now pissing coolant and fluid all over the driveway and everything. He's thinking, what the hell? And the guy who ripped it out's like, oh, well, you're parting it anyway. He was going to take a couple of hoses and this and that, and for nothing. The guy said, nah, you're not taking anything else, get out. So then I come along, and it's now missing a radiator. So it's missing a radiator and the side skirts. But that's fine. So I go searching for a radiator, and I managed to find one. But not all the hoses are available for that particular model, so had to improvise and get some flexi hose and a couple of other hoses, kind of join hoses. And forgot the part about it being an automatic, because automatics have a couple of little tiny hoses, in this case for the automatic fluids to go through the bottom of the radiator to cool. And so we had to improvise with some, I think it might have been some compressor hose and a garden hose that the guy cut up, and we were there for hours installing this radiator and these hoses and getting the car back up and running, filling it up with fluids. It had squeaky brakes because they needed to be replaced. The speedo wasn't working because there were a couple of issues, a speed sensor, perhaps a couple of other things, a few lights flashing, this, that and everything else. And it wasn't registered. But I'm not going to tell you how it got home, but I will say it got home. So then, fixing it up. Not a problem. Easy. Had to go and get a couple of parts, particularly the ABS sensor, which was a pain in the neck. And as it turns out, all it was it just needed to be reset. That was a pain in the ass in itself. Then that fixed things up. Then we fixed up a few wiring issues. And the speed sensor. It was done. I got one of my good friends, Jack, who is mechanically sound, to fix a few other things that were picked up on a roadworthy, like boots, stupid little boots, CV boots, little rubber things that go around the underside of the car, just little shoes like for your vehicle. Just look it up. But little stupid things that really shouldn't matter. And we've replaced the brakes on them. That fixed that noise. And it's really all that was wrong with it. So there was no problem with it at all. None. All these minor issues, and well, apart from having to get the radiator and that. So I bought a car for $1,000, and to this point I'd only put $1,000 in it, plus a few other things, which put it up to maybe about $1,500. So that should have been the end of it, right? What happened then was Jack accidentally, we later found out, knocked a cable, which ended up causing the key not to basically start the vehicle, because the chip wasn't being recognized. And after going to a locksmiths and finding out just how expensive it is, and going to an actual decent locksmith guy who was knowledgeable, decent and honest, knew what he was talking about, and if I could get his name right now and recommend him to everyone who's listening, actually. I believe it was Pronto Locksmiths at Logan Lee. I'm pretty sure that was the place. But nevertheless, he saved me hundreds of dollars by doing a simple check of all the wiring and checking the O-ring, and the car started again after getting a couple of installed items in it and it fiddling around with the wiring. A wire was knocked, especially putting an alarm system in. One wire happened to be knocked, and it was the wire that stopped the car from getting started, the key from being recognized to the vehicle. So that should have been the end of it, right? No, there was a little other issue with a couple of wires and that, and then that had to be fixed. And that should have been the end of it, right? No, not quite, because then when I went to get it for the next roadworthy check, it was discovered that there was a leaking O-ring which just kind of presented itself. And also, the arm bearing for the steering column, for at least the arm stabilizer, whatever you call it, had broken because of a faulty wheel bearing, which had to be fixed. So, yeah, that put the price up to, and especially after getting registration, which is the most expensive goddamn thing of all. So I put $3,000 into this vehicle overall, and now I've got it listed for sale for $6,000. No one's buying it, no one's budging into it. It's like, okay, well, because I put it up high so I'd see if how much breathing room I've got. Obviously not. $5,500, no one's really budging. Put it down to $5,000. Now I'm starting to get a couple of interested buyers. But here's the issue. The interested buyer who contacted me, once again, a time waster who's like, yeah, I want to do it, I want to buy it, I want to do this, that, blah, blah, blah. Okay, organized day, organized time. Did not show. You know? Good thing I didn't take him seriously or wait around. Because if I did, as usual, would have wasted my goddamn time. I gotta finish this story because I gotta go pick up a car, in fact. So, long story short, I got contacted by a lovely Kiwi dude. He was a nice guy. And I don't know if he was the uncle or the father. I think it might have been the father or uncle. I don't know. But he brought the clan. And the clan, yeah, you're probably thinking, oh, his bros, his cousins from, New Zealand, a couple of Maori fellas. No, actually. You're racist for assuming that. No. No. He brought a bunch of Asian fellas. Not that there's anything wrong with that. Except for the one thing where they were negotiating and talking and inspecting in Mandarin, I believe. One of Chinese languages. Basically, they were talking in code to each other and basically going through the entire vehicle while I'm talking to the Maori fella, if you will. And it's for a kid, probably about 19 or so, a P-plater, and I think the Asian father, who was apparently a mechanic. Now, the one thing I forgot to do in the vehicle was get the air conditioner recompressed. That was something that needed to be done. I got the air conditioner compressor replaced in it, but I never got it actually compressed, put more, or regassed rather. Regassed. That's what I'm looking for. And he comes to me and it's like, I'll give you $4,000. It's like, no. Or maybe it was like 4,200. It's like, no, that's way too low. Look, it's worth it. It's like, but to replace the air conditioner compressor, so he's translating for his father. The kid's translating for his father. It's like, because he's a mechanic and air conditioner compressor costs $900. Like, no, the aircon compressor's been replaced. It just needs regassing. Oh yeah, well it costs $900. Like, no, it doesn't. It's like, he's a mechanic. It's like, I wouldn't pay $900, and I know places cheaper than that if you ever do, and also because the part's under warranty as well. All the while, they're fiddling, they're jiggling, they're looking, they're not test driving the vehicle. And myself, I'm saying, okay, look, just test drive the vehicle. Go for a test drive because, look, we're just looking at, the paint's faded on this panel. It's like, yeah, Yes, that's $50 to replace that. Just look, all you got to do is test drive the vehicle, because cars in this condition, and here's a little piece of advice for everyone right now: Honda Preludes, especially automatics, the old Tiptronic Hondas, were prone to failure because of the way people drove them, because Honda manuals, strong gearbox, very reliable. Their Tiptronics, their automatics at that time, they'll even say had issues. And especially people, because Honda Preludes, sports coupe, you get the young people, or even not the young people, or the young people at that time, the rich people, because the car was about 50, 60,000 back in the heyday to buy. Came with all accessories and everything else, but yeah, about 60,000 starting price to buy them when they were brand new back in 2000. And this is a 97 model. So it was a little bit older, but still same shape, same model. So it would have been about 60,000, and had additional extras on it, including a ridiculous, freaking spoiler, like a car, like a freaking aeroplane spoiler on it, which was obviously what attracted the young fella. And the family were just looking through it. Look, just take it for a test drive, because then you will know. Because those gearboxes, like I said, go to finish my point, they had an issue where they would just break, they would become clunky, clanky in changing. They would basically destroy themselves, because if you put your foot down and you didn't drive them properly, then you'd basically destroy the gearbox, you'd destroy the car. So they took it for a test drive, and oh my goodness, it drove really smooth. It was, now they're impressed. Now they're like, oh, this is good. So now that $4,200 price that they tried busking me down to, obviously now room for negotiation has just obviously been made known to them. So there was the Asian father, and then the Asian mother, and her friend, who I think was a Japanese exchange student. Yeah, it was an interesting scenario right there. So then now we do the test drive and everything, and now Asian Tiger Mum comes over to me. She comes over to me and said, because they talk to each other in Mandarin or Chinese, whatever language they were speaking, say, 4,500, we take now. We want it. We want car. We pay you 4,500. Like, alright, so $5,000 originally. Said, alright. 4,750 is probably the lowest I can go. Like, 45. It's like, okay, 4,600, final offer. We take it now. It's only 4,600. We want it. We take it. This was actually how she talked, so anyone who wants to accuse me of being racist or, racially biased, no, that's actually how she talked. I am reenacting word for word here, so don't even start. So yeah, then basically my now advanced negotiation skills, I basically said to her, because she said 4,600 final offer, and I said 4,650 final offer. So, and then she said to me, "Oh, come on, you're gonna want a more $50. You're gonna hold out for $50 more." And I said to her, "Look, you know what? If I'm willing to come down 100 from 47.50, which was my final offer, then you can come up 50." So what I said, yeah, basically, if I can come down 100, you can come up 50. And then she said, "Oh, okay." Shake the hand. That's the deal. It's like, "Oh, you're in the wrong job. You should be lawyer. You're good. You're good." So I managed to get the car sold, and yeah. So then got the paperwork done the next night. Got it all filled out. The Asian father was going through it, fiddling it with it, this, that, and everything else. Looking through it again. It's like, oh, just get rid of the car. So I made about $1,000 or $2 profit from it, and also the fact that I bought a parts car for $250. So a lot of the parts that I did need to replace out of it, I was able to get out of the silver car. It saved me a lot of money, and it was good. So I've still, got to deal with that. That's the next thing I've got to deal with. But in the meantime, I've actually got to go pick up a car right now. As of this little chronological timeline, pick up a car from the mechanic before they shut. I've got 13 minutes to get there, and that's if I go running. And I am a proficiently skilled middle distance runner, even though I've put that on the shelf in terms of a career. I still got it, and I'm gonna have to go get it. I hope you enjoyed my stories about my car sale nightmares, and they probably aren't the worst. I know there are a lot of people that probably had a lot worse. Those are mine. What are yours? Why don't you tell me? Why don't you send me a message? And hey, maybe I could have you on the show and we can discuss, hey, my car nightmares? What about yours? Because I've got other stories not related to car sale nightmares, but car mechanics. And there is a story that I will put out at some point in time regarding my first ever Honda Prelude, which was my second ever car. That will take a whole episode in and of. I just don't have the time right now. And if I tell that story, it'll probably be the last time that I ever tell it. Well, I'm prattling on right now. I've now got 11 minutes to get down to the mechanic. So, I hope you enjoyed it. My name is Liam. Thank you all for listening. I will see you guys next time.